In just 19 days, one man completely turned the Catholic Church upside down. Not through scandal or controversy, but through acts so simple yet so radical that they're sending shockwaves from the Vatican all the way to your local parish. I'm talking about Pope Leo XIV, and what he's done in less than 3 weeks has left cardinals speechless, bishops confused, and millions of Catholics around the world asking one question: is this the revolution the Church has been waiting for? Before we dive into these 10 incredible changes, drop a comment right now telling me where you're watching from. I want to know because what we're about to discuss affects Catholics everywhere, and I have a feeling this video found you for a reason. Also, hit that like button if you believe God still works in mysterious ways, and subscribe because we're about to uncover some stories from inside the Vatican that will blow your mind. Now, let's get into it. The first thing Pope Leo did was announce that every single bishop in the Catholic Church, we're talking about thousands of bishops worldwide, must walk barefoot in at least one public procession every year. Not inside some fancy cathedral where only the wealthy can see them, but outside on the streets where the homeless sleep, where children play, where real people live their real lives. When I first heard this, I thought, that's interesting. But why? Then I learned the story behind it, and it completely changed how I see this pope. It's July 2nd, 1987. The man who would become Pope Leo is just Father Robert, a young missionary in Peru. He's not wearing papal robes, he's not living in the Vatican. He's in a tiny village surrounded by hills and dust, trying to make a difference one person at a time. A little boy comes running to him, tears streaming down his face. His sister is dying, and the village priest is gone. Father Robert doesn't hesitate. He follows the boy. But here's the thing. The road to this village is brutal. Sharp rocks everywhere, thorns that can tear through skin. It's the kind of path that would make most of us think twice. But this little boy, he's not wearing shoes. Nobody in his village wears shoes. They can't afford them. So Father Robert does something that would change his life forever. He takes off his shoes and walks those 2 miles barefoot under the scorching sun, blood dripping from his feet, every step agony. When he finally reaches the village, something magical happens. An old woman kisses his bleeding hand and whispers, "You came like us. Now we believe you." From that day forward, Father Robert never wore shoes unless the people around him could wear them too. And now, as Pope Leo XIV, he wants every bishop to learn that same lesson. If you're going to lead people, you better be willing to walk in their shoes, or in this case, without any shoes at all. Can you imagine being a bishop who spent years riding in luxury cars and living in beautiful houses, suddenly being told, you have to walk barefoot through the streets where drug addicts and homeless people live? Some bishops were shocked. Others were uncomfortable. But Pope Leo didn't care. He knew why it mattered. The second change is even more radical. Pope Leo opened a section of the Vatican gardens, those pristine, manicured gardens that have been off-limits to regular people for centuries, to homeless individuals every single night. Let me be clear about this. We're talking about the Vatican, the most exclusive real estate in the world, gardens that have been protected and preserved for hundreds of years. And now, every evening, homeless people are brought in to sleep under the trees. They're given warm food, clean blankets, and something many of them haven't had in years: safety. No cameras, no press, no politicians trying to score points. Just quiet, dignified help. When Vatican officials questioned this decision, and trust me, they did, Pope Leo's response was perfect. If the Garden of Eden was meant to be shared, then so should ours. But here's the story that explains why this matters so much to him. It's January 1979. Future Pope Leo is just a student named Robert, helping out at a soup kitchen in Chicago. Every Wednesday night, he hands out bowls of hot stew to whoever shows up. Nothing glamorous, just basic human kindness. One night, after locking up, he sees an old man sitting on the church steps. It's freezing cold. The man has wrapped newspaper around his legs for warmth and is shivering uncontrollably. Robert sits down next to him. They don't talk. They just sit there in the cold together. When Robert finally stands up to leave, the old man whispers 6 words that would haunt him forever. "Thank you for seeing me." Think about that. This man wasn't asking for money. He wasn't asking for food. He was thanking someone for simply acknowledging his existence. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he's making sure that people whose society has made invisible are seen, even in the most sacred spaces in the world. The third change might seem small, but it's actually huge. Pope Leo has quietly started wearing simpler clothes, less gold, smaller crosses, plain white robes instead of the elaborate papal garments we're used to seeing. He still wears traditional clothing during formal ceremonies. He's not trying to destroy tradition. But during regular church events, he looks more like a regular priest than the most powerful religious leader in the world. When photographers try to focus on the details of his clothing, he asks them not to. When someone asked him why he chose a simpler robe for a major mass, his answer was brilliant. People are hungry for truth, not fabric. This comes from his time as an Augustinian friar. When he took his vows in 1981, he promised to live simply and avoid showing off. As a young friar, he served food at the back of the room instead of sitting at the head table. He wore the same black robe every single day. Even when he became a bishop, he kept his clothing plain. No gold chains, no custom tailoring. There's a beautiful story from his time in Peru. He was visiting a rural parish when a young girl looked at his worn-out shoes and said, "You dress like our fathers. You must care like they do too." That's the power of simplicity. When you strip away the external symbols of power and wealth, people can finally see your heart. The fourth change is about language, and this one has some people talking. Pope Leo has started introducing more inclusive language into church prayers and liturgies. Now, before anyone gets upset, let me explain what this actually means. He's not rewriting the Bible. He's not changing core Catholic doctrine, but he is making small adjustments to help everyone feel welcome. For example, where prayers used to say brothers, they now say brothers and sisters when referring to people of faith. Gender-neutral terms are sometimes used where appropriate and traditional. These aren't radical changes, they're simple acknowledgements that God's family includes everyone. When asked about this, Pope Leo said something beautiful. God speaks to every heart. Our language should not block the sound of his voice. This comes from his years serving in Peru between 1985 and 1994. He worked in villages filled with people of different languages, backgrounds, and stories. Some were women who had never been invited to speak in church. Others were families who didn't feel welcome because of how they looked or where they came from. He once told a local catechist, "If the gospel makes someone feel left out, we've told it wrong." One Sunday, after holding Mass under a tree, an elderly woman came up to him with tears in her eyes. She said, "I finally heard myself in the prayer today. Thank you." Sometimes just saying, "You belong," is the first step to making it true. Here's where things get really interesting. Pope Leo has launched something called the Green Vatican Initiative, with a goal to make Vatican City completely carbon neutral by 2030. We're talking about solar energy, reducing waste, planting trees, cutting down on plastic and pollution. This is a massive undertaking for an institution that's been around for nearly 2,000 years. On May 20th, 2025, he said something that perfectly captures his thinking. "We cannot preach care for the soul while ignoring the home that holds it. The earth is God's gift. We must protect it." Some people called this too ambitious. Others said it was about time. But for Pope Leo, caring for the environment isn't just science, it's faith in action. The story behind this decision will break your heart. In 1992, Father Robert was visiting a village near the Amazon rainforest. When he arrived, he expected to see the lush green paradise he'd heard about. Instead, he found devastation. The trees had been cut down. The air was thick with smoke from fires used to clear land. Children were coughing constantly. The river was filled with waste and pollution. A young girl looked at him and said, "We can't pray under the trees anymore. They are all gone." That image, children who couldn't pray under trees because there were no trees left, stayed with him forever. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he sees environmental care as part of the Church's sacred mission. As he once said, "There is no holiness in stained glass if the sky above it is dying." The sixth change is about power, and it's revolutionary. Pope Leo is giving more decision-making authority to local dioceses around the world. Instead of requiring every major decision to go through Rome, which could take months or even years, local bishops can now handle more things on their own. Language and worship styles, cultural practices, pastoral needs. The idea is simple. Let local churches serve their people in the way that fits them best. He explained it perfectly in a private meeting with church leaders. You cannot lead a village from a balcony in Rome. You must be close enough to hear their voice. This comes from his experience in Peru. In 1988, he was sent to a small parish deep in the mountains. No phone, no electricity, no fast way to reach his superiors in Rome. At first, he thought the local people were disorganized. They ran their own music, baptisms, Bible studies, even funerals. They weren't waiting for permission from Rome to serve their community. But slowly he saw something beautiful. They weren't waiting for orders. They were serving from the heart. One Sunday he asked the village elder why they didn't call the main office in Lima for help with decisions. The elder smiled and said, "Because God already lives here. We just listen." That line changed everything for him. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he wants the Church to trust its people more, because sometimes the best leaders are the ones who listen to the flock instead of just giving orders from above. The seventh change is about dialogue with other religions, and it's exactly what our world needs right now. Pope Leo is creating new councils around the world that include priests, scholars, and regular churchgoers who will meet regularly with leaders from Islam, Judaism, Buddhism, and other faiths. The goal isn't to argue about who's right. It's to understand each other better, work together for peace, and serve the poor side by side. During a press briefing on May 22, 2025, he said something that should be written in gold. Faith should not be used to build walls. It should be used to build tables. This comes from his time in northern Peru in 1990, when he visited a refugee camp filled with people of many different beliefs: Catholics, Muslims, indigenous people, and others who followed no organized religion at all. He went not to preach, but to help deliver food and blankets. One afternoon, he sat beside a Muslim nurse who had just helped treat a sick child. They prayed together, each in their own way, while the child slept. Afterward, she said something profound. We may speak to God in different languages, but he hears the same pain. Later in Chicago, he worked in neighborhoods where synagogues, churches, and mosques stood on the same block. He learned that sometimes the best way to lead is simply to listen. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he believes that silence between faiths only creates fear. That's why he's making space for different voices to come together, not to change each other, but to know each other. Because in his words, if peace is ever going to last, it must start with a handshake, not a sermon. The eighth change is about money, and it's going to make some people very uncomfortable. Pope Leo has ordered regular audits by independent experts and made key financial reports available to the public each year. No more secrecy, no more confusion about where donations go. On May 24, 2025, he said something that cut right to the heart of the matter. If we ask the faithful to give with open hearts, we must manage those gifts with open books. This comes from his experience leading the Augustinian order worldwide, starting in 2001. It wasn't just a spiritual job, it involved budgets, staff, and international operations. At one point, he discovered missing funds in a local project. He worked day and night reviewing receipts, asking tough questions, making difficult changes. He later said that experience taught him something crucial. Money is not the problem. Silence is. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, He wants every Catholic to know exactly how their donations are used to support missions, care for the poor, and keep the Church moving forward. Because in his words, the truth should not be hidden in a drawer, it should be placed on the altar. The ninth change is about young people, and it's brilliant. Pope Leo has created global youth councils made up of young Catholics from different countries, cultures, and backgrounds. Their job is to meet regularly, share ideas, and give honest feedback to church leaders about faith, technology, education, mental health, and other issues that matter to their generation. When he announced this on May 25, 2025, he said something that every parent and teacher should hear. Too often, we preach to the youth without asking what they see, what they feel, or what they hope for. We cannot lead them if we do not listen to them. This comes from his time in Peru in the early 1990s, when he would gather children and teenagers under a mango tree after Mass. He didn't give long sermons, he asked them questions, he listened to their answers. He helped with homework, he played music and taught them to lead prayers. One day, a teenage boy named Julio asked him, "Father, why does no one in Rome ever ask what we think?" Robert smiled and replied, "Maybe one day they will." Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he's keeping that promise. These youth councils will meet online and in person. Their ideas will go directly to the Vatican. Some will even be invited to Rome to speak face-to-face with cardinals and church leaders. One girl from Nigeria said after joining a council, "I never thought someone in the Vatican would care about what I had to say. Now I know they do." Pope Leo believes that listening to young people isn't a sign of weakness, it's a sign of wisdom. Because in his words, a church that speaks to youth is strong, but a church that listens to youth will last. The 10th and final change might surprise you. Pope Leo is bringing back traditional confessionals in a big way. He's asked priests around the world to spend more time in confession boxes. He's encouraged churches to keep confessionals open during the week, not just on Sundays. He's reminded people that confession isn't something to fear, it's something that heals the heart. On May 26, 2025, standing near one of the old wooden confessionals in St. Peter's Basilica, he said, "In this box, the soul learns to breathe again. We must return to it not because of guilt, but because of grace." Some people think the world has moved past this old practice. They say people confess in their own ways now, online, in journals, through quiet prayer. Pope Leo agrees that prayer is powerful, but he also believes something important. Confession isn't just about saying sorry, it's about being seen, forgiven, and set free. This comes from his time serving in Peru in the late 1980s. Father Robert would sit in small wooden confession booths for hours. Many times no one came, but he stayed. He once said, "If someone builds the courage to walk through that door, I want to already be there." One day, near closing time, a man walked into the church. His face was hard, his shoulders were tight. He told Father Robert he hadn't been to confession in over 30 years. His voice shook. He cried in the middle of his words. After he finished, he looked at the young priest and whispered, "Is it too late to be clean again?" Father Robert didn't say much. He just reached through the screen and placed his hand on the wood. "It's never too late," he said. That moment stayed in his heart forever. Now, as Pope Leo XIV, he's not trying to bring back the past just for tradition's sake. He's bringing it back because he believes people are carrying silent pain, and confession helps them release it. He wants every confessional, big or small, old or new, to become a place where people find peace again. Because in his words, when you kneel in confession, you don't kneel in weakness. You kneel in hope. So there you have it. 10 changes in 19 days that are reshaping the Catholic Church. From barefoot bishops to homeless people sleeping in Vatican gardens. From simpler papal clothing to more inclusive language. From environmental action to financial transparency. From listening to other faiths to empowering young voices. From trusting local churches to bringing back the healing power of confession. These aren't just administrative changes, they're reflections of a life devoted to humility, service, and faith. But here's what I want you to understand. None of these changes happened by accident. Every single one comes from a real experience, a real moment when a young priest named Robert learned something that would stay with him forever. The barefoot processions come from bleeding feet on a rocky road in Peru. The Vatican gardens for the homeless come from a shivering man on church steps in Chicago. The simple clothing comes from serving food at the back of the room instead of sitting at the head table. The inclusive language comes from an elderly woman who finally heard herself in a prayer. The environmental focus comes from a little girl who couldn't pray under trees because they were all gone. Do you see the pattern? Every reform comes from a moment when he saw someone else's pain and decided to do something about it. As the world watches, one question remains. How will these changes shape the future of the Church? I think the answer lies in understanding what Pope Leo XIV really represents. He's not trying to destroy tradition. He's trying to return to the original tradition of Jesus Christ, walking with the poor, caring for the outcast, living simply, speaking truth, protecting creation, building bridges instead of walls. Just weeks into his papacy, Pope Leo has begun to reshape the Church, not with noise, but with quiet acts of purpose. Because for him, true change doesn't begin in marble halls. It begins where feet are bare, hands are open, and hearts are finally heard. If this story moved you, I want you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button to let me know this resonated with you. Second, share this video with someone who still believes in quiet courage and the power of simple acts of love. And third, subscribe to this channel because we're just getting started with untold stories from inside the Vatican. Before you go, I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 changes surprised you the most? Which one do you think will have the biggest impact on the Church? Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and remember, sometimes the most revolutionary thing you can do is simply see someone who feels invisible, listen to someone who feels unheard, and love someone who feels unloved. That's what Pope Leo XIV is doing, and maybe, just maybe, that's what all of us called to do too. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.